Test your microphone, I mean your speakers.
Worky, worky.
Yay! That's always good.
Just a quick note before we start to remind people two things. At the back of the hall by the entrance, you'll find RFL kiosks. And as we're all doing this for Relay for Life, as well as the pleasure of the text, it would be lovely if you could make a donation. And the other thing is at the back, there is a book table curated by Dawny Davio that has books from many of the readings and performances we have here. And Quim, if you have any books that you would like to add to the book table, perhaps you could have a word with Dawny and put something up. Thank you, everyone. I'll go and take my place in the audience.
Well, thank you everyone for coming out kind of early in the morning. Uh, this is Kim Toxx. I am a fairy who lives in the fairy crossing, which is a set of Sims that were born here in Second Life in 2007. The fairy crossing is home for a real life druid group, the Druids of the Second Realm, of which I am a member. One common event for Druids is the Bardic Circle, when folks gather to tell stories and sing songs. In the Fairy Crossing, our Bardic Circle is every Saturday evening. That is where I've been practicing as a storyteller now for more than 15 years. Fairy tales go back, excuse me. Fairy tales go back hundreds of years. These stories were told by word of mouth, passed from generation to generation. And fairy tales often did not resolve with a happy ending because they were trying to teach something along with entertaining. We all like happy endings, but it isn't reality. And if we always have happy endings to our stories, we are setting children and adults up with false expectations about life. The prince on the white horse doesn't always come. People die. People do mean things. There is pain and suffering. The more we talk about these things, the more we help others cope with life, to handle adversity in a healthy way. It also helps our sense of empathy for others by allowing us to walk in someone else's shoes. Hearing fairy tales and folk myths is also a chance to learn about other cultures and times. So, whenever I can, I try to identify the place and time when a story was first written down. Now, I have two stories this morning. I'll take a short break, kind of a stretch break between the two. Don't worry. This is that was the point of this, Joanne, that children need to hear unresolved stories, stories that are sad, so that they can learn to be empathetic and to be ready for the real world. Absolutely. Disney is one of the worst about making things, uh, putting a happy ending on a story. Most of the movies that you've seen, the stories you've seen from Disney, like The Little Mermaid and Cinderella and Snow White, all had actually sad endings. But we didn't know that when we were growing up because all we saw was the Disney version. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and start my first. I see that music is playing, so you might want to turn off the music so you can hear my voice better if you have music playing. Anyway, so the first one I'm going to read is The Story of a Mother, which was recorded first by Hans Christian Andersen, who lived 1805 to 1875 in Denmark. A mother sat by her little child. She was very sorrowful, fearing that it would die. Its little pale face, its eyes were closed as it lay so still in its cradle. The child drew its breath with difficulty, and sometimes as deeply as if it was sighing. And then the mother looked even more sorrowfully than before on the little creature. There was a knock at the door, and a poor old man came in, wrapped up in something that looked like a great horsecloth. And he needed it, for it was cold winter. Outside, everything was covered with ice and snow, and the wild wind blew so sharply that it cut one's face. And as the old man trembled with cold, and the child was quiet for a moment, the mother went and put some beer on the stove in a little pot to warm it for him. The old man sat down and rocked the cradle, and the mother seated herself on a chair by him, looked at her sick child that drew its breath so painfully, and lifted the little hand. "You think I shall keep it, do you not?" she asked. "The good God will not take it from me." And the old man, who was deaf, nodded in a strange way that it might just as well mean yes or no. And the mother cast her eyes down, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her head became heavy. For 3 days and 3 nights she had not closed her eyes. And now she slept, but only for a minute. Then she started up and shivered with cold. "What is it?" she asked, and looked around on all sides. But the old man was gone, and her little child was gone. He had taken it with him. The poor mother rushed out of the house, crying for her child. Out in the snow sat a woman in long black garments, and she said, "Death has been with you in your room. I saw him hasten away with your child. He strides faster than the wind, and never brings back what he has taken away." "Only tell me, which way has he gone?" said the mother. "Tell me, and I will find him." "I know him," said the woman in the black garments. "But before I tell you, you must sing me all the songs that you have sung to your child. I love those songs. I have heard them before. I am Night, and I saw your tears when you sang them." "I will sing them all," said the mother. "But do not detain me that I may overtake him and find my child." But Night sat dumb and still. Then the mother wrung her hands and sang and wept. And there were many songs, but yet more tears. And then Night said, "Go to the right into the dark fir wood, for I saw Death take that path with your little child." Deep into the forest there was a crossroad, and she did not know which way to take. There stood a thorn bush, with not a leaf nor a blossom upon it, for it was in the cold winter time, and icicles hung from the twigs. "Have you not seen Death go by with my little child?" "Yes," replied the bush, "but I shall not tell you which way he went unless you warm me by with your bosom. I'm freezing to death here. I'm turning to ice." And she pressed the thorn bush to her bosom, quite close, that it might be well warmed. And the thorns pierced her flesh, and her blood oozed out in great drops. But the thorn shot out fresh green leaves and blossomed in the dark winter night. So warm is the heart of a sorrowing mother. And the thorn bush told her the way she should go. Then she came to a great lake, on which there were neither ships nor boat. The lake was not frozen enough to carry her, nor sufficiently open to allow her to wade through, and yet she must cross it if she was to find her child. Then she laid down to drink the lake, and that was impossible for anyone to do. But the sorrowing mother thought that perhaps a miracle might be wrought. "No, you cannot succeed," said the lake. "Let us rather see how we can agree. I'm fond of collecting pearls, and your eyes are the two clearest I have ever seen. If you will weep them out into me, I will carry you over into the great greenhouse where death lives and cultivates flowers and trees. Each of these is a human life." "Oh, what would I not give for my child?" said the afflicted mother, and she wept yet more, and her eyes fell into the depths of the lake and became two costly pearls. But the lake lifted her up as if she was in a swing, and she was wafted to the opposite shore, where such a wonderful place, miles in length, sat. One could not tell if it was a mountain containing forests and caves, or a place that had been built, but the poor mother could not see it, for she had wept her eyes out. "Where shall I find Death, who went away with my little child?" she asked. "He has not arrived yet," said the old grave woman, who was going about and watching the hothouse of Death. "How have you found your way here, and who helped you?" "The good God has helped me," she replied. "He is merciful, and you will be merciful too. Where shall I find my little child?" "I do not know it," said the old woman. "You cannot see. Many flowers and trees have faded this night, and Death will soon come and transplant them. You know very well that every human being has his tree of life, or his flower of life, just as each is arranged. They look like other plants, but their hearts beat. Children's hearts can beat too. Go by that. Perhaps you may recognize the beating of your child's heart. But what will you give me if I tell you what more you must do?" "I have nothing more to give," said the afflicted mother, "but I will go for you to the ends of the earth." "I have nothing for you to do there," said the old woman, "but you can give me your long black hair. I must know yourself. You must know yourself that it is beautiful, and it pleases me. You can take my white hair for it, and that is always something." "If you ask for nothing more," said the mother, "I will give it to you gladly." And she gave her beautiful hair and received in exchange the old woman's white hair. And then they went into the great hothouse. They went into the great hothouse of Death, where flowers and trees were growing marvelously together. There stood the fine hyacinths under glass bells, and there the large, sturdy peonies. There grew water plants, some quite fresh, others somewhat sickly. Water snakes were twining around them, and black crabs clung tightly to the stalks. There stood gallant palm trees, oaks, plantains, and parsley in blooming time. Each tree and flower had its name. Each was a human life. The people were still alive, one in China, that one in Greenland, scattered about in the world. There were a great many trees thrust into little pots, so that they stood quite crowded and were nearly bursting the pots. There was also many a little weakly flower, in rich earth, with moss round it, cared for and tended. But the sorrowful mother bent down over all the smallest plants, and heard the human heart beating in each. And out of all the millions, she recognized that of her child. "That is it!" she cried, and stretched out her hands over a little blue crocus flower, which hung down quite sick and pale. "Do not touch the flower," said the old dame, "but place yourself here, and when Death comes, I expect him any minute, then don't let him pull up the plant, but threaten him that you will do the same to the other plants, that he'll be frightened. He has to account for them all. No one no one may be pulled up till he receives commission from heaven." And all at once there was an icy, cold rush through the hall, and the blind mother felt that Death was arriving. "How did you find your way hither?" said he. "Have you been able to come quicker than I?" I'm a mother, she answered. And Death stretched out his long hands toward the delicate little flower. But she kept her hands tight about it and held it fast. And yet she was full of anxious care lest she should touch one of the leaves. Then Death breathed upon her hands, and she felt that his breath was colder than the icy wind, and her hands sank down, powerless. You can do nothing against me, said Death. But the merciful God can, she replied. I only do what he commands, said Death. I am his gardener. I take all his trees and flowers and transplant them into the great paradise gardens in the unknown land. But how they will flourish there and how it is there, I may not tell you. Give me back my child, said the mother, and she implored and wept. All at once she grasped two pretty flowers with her two hands and called to Death, I'll tear off these flowers, for I am in despair. Do not touch them, said Death. You say you are so unhappy, and now you make another mother just as unhappy? Another mother? Said the poor woman, and she let the flowers go. There are your eyes for you, said Death. I have fished them up out of the lake. They gleamed up quite brightly. I did not know they were yours. Take them back. They are clearer now than before. And then look down into that deep well close by. I will tell you the names of the two flowers you wanted to pull up, and you will see their whole future, their whole human life. You will see what it was you were about to frustrate and destroy. And she looked down into the well, and it was a happiness to see how one of the children became blessed to the world with much joy and gladness diffused around her. And the woman looked at the life of the other child, and it was made up of sickness, poverty, misery. She looked again at the two flowers growing at the feet of Death and asked, which of them is the flower of misfortune, and which the joyful one? That I may not tell you, answered Death, but this much you shall hear, that one of these flowers is that of your child. It was the fate of your child that you saw, the future of your own child. Then the mother screamed aloud in terror. Which flower belongs to my child? Tell me that. Please release my innocent child, and let the other child be free from all that misery and misfortune. Rather carry my dear one away, forget my tears, forget my entreaties, and all that I have done. I do not understand you, said Death. Will you have your child back, or shall I carry it to the place that you know not? Then the mother wrung her hands and fell on her knees. Oh God, hear me not when I pray against thy will, which is all, at times, the best. Hear me not, hear me not. And she let her head sink down on her bosom. And Death plucked one of the flowers from the ground, and away he went with her child into the unknown land. The end. Now I'm going to guess that it's going to take you a minute to get over that story. I warned you. Fair warning. But it's a real honest to goodness Hans Christian Andersen story. So I'm going to ask you to take just a stretch break for just a minute or two before I start my second story. You're all very welcome. One down, one to go. Nobody needs to sit more than 20 minutes. So thank you. Take a break. All right, I hope everyone took advantage of that minute or two and did a little bit of a stretch. Um, I'm going to tell my second story now. This is the dark side of fairy tales, and so just a little bit for those of you that came in late. A little quick intro here. Fairy tale lessons aren't always morals per se. Sometimes they are a shut up and take it message, usually to women. But women are the ones who retell the tales, generation to generation. Why would they do that? Their goal appears to be in part to tell their sisters, be ready, life is ugly, steel yourself. But also, society doesn't value you as a person, only your beauty, your timidity, and your ability to bear children. Do what you are told if you know what is good for you. When the tales are retold in modern times, they are almost always softened, cleaned up. Disney is a major contributor to that trend. It is a masking of painful truths that still exist today: incest, rape, female genital mutilation, child abuse. We don't usually talk about it. And now it is being removed from our stories so we don't even get reminded that it happens. This leaves the innocent to be taken unawares with no tools to deal with it, leaving them feeling that their situation is unique and most certainly their own fault. My second story is one of these original ones. Fair warning. The name of this story is Broom Throw, Brush Throw, Comb Throw. It was written down in 1896 in Austria by Theodor Vernalenken. In a castle, in a castle, in a castle, there once lived a count by the name of Rudolph. His wife had a birthmark, a golden cross on her forehead. Their daughter, Adelaide, had the same mark on her forehead. When she was 20 years old, her mother suddenly died. The count's and his daughter's sorrow and grief were endless. After the mother's burial, the father and his child locked themselves in their rooms and were seldom seen. After a month had passed, the count and his daughter brought to his room. Count had his daughter brought to his room and said to her, "Dear child, you know how much I loved your mother, but I cannot live without a wife. Therefore I am going out into the world to seek a wife who, like your blessed mother, has a golden cross on her forehead. If I do not find such a woman within a year and a day, then I will marry you." When Adelaide heard these words, she was very upset, and she silently withdrew. The next morning, Count Rudolph departed, promising to return within a year and a day. When Adelaide was alone, she considered whether or not it would be possible for her father to find a woman with such a cross. Then she remembered that her mother had once told her that except for her and Adelaide, no one on the entire earth had such a cross. She decided to go away. She would rather earn her bread with work of her own hands than eat the finest tidbits at her father's table as his wife. She entrusted one of her loyal servants with her plan, and they made preparations to depart. She secretly loaded her valuables, her jewelry, her gold, and her clothes into several large carriages. During the night she drove off with them, accompanied by her servant Gotthold and several others who were loyal to her. They came to a large city where she rented a house and moved into it with her servants. Adelaide had often stated that she wanted to earn her bread with the work of her own hands. Therefore, Gotthold sought a position for his mistress in the city. He learned that there was an opening for a kitchen maid in the castle of Prince Adolf. Thus he went to the chief cook there and asked him if he would be willing to hire his niece, for that is what he called the countess. The chief cook agreed to hire her. The loyal servant happily returned to the Countess and told her of the opportunity. Adelaide now dyed her face, neck, and hands brown, and covered her golden cross and her hair with a large headscarf. She took off her magnificent robes, putting on instead old, dirty, torn clothing, and presented herself to the chief cook. She was given a small room where she could sleep and keep her things. Slowly, she grew accustomed to her job, even though she was exhausted by the hard work. Until now, she had not yet seen the prince. One day, the prince invited all of his friends and acquaintances to a great ball. On the morning of the ball, Adelaide was sweeping the staircase when the prince walked by and clumsily tipped over the dust pail, thus dirtying his boots. As she turned to flee from his raised fists, he angrily ripped the broom from her hands and threw it at her. That evening, as the hall was filling with people, the young countess went to the chief cook and asked him for permission to go to the ball. He replied, "No, I cannot allow you to do that. What if the prince were to find out?" Adelaide continued to beg until he finally said, "Oh, just go. But don't stay too late, and if you get anything, bring back some for me as well." She went to her house that Gotthold had managed for her, changed her clothes, washed away the color, and ordered up a splendid carriage in which she rode to the ball. When the guests saw the splendid carriage approaching in the distance, they all hurried outside and said, "Oh, a foreign lady! A beautiful lady!" The prince hurried toward her, lifted her from the carriage, and led her up the stairs. She had to dance with him the entire evening and to sit next to him at the table. After eating, he asked her what her name was and where she came from. "My name is Adelaide, and I come from Broomthrow," replied the countess. At 12 o'clock she left, and with the majority of the guests. Arriving at home, she quickly got undressed, colored herself brown, and took 3 gold pieces which she gave to the chief cook the next day, claiming that she had received the gold from an old woman. The next day, the prince looked for Broomthrow on his maps, but he could not find it. He wanted to ask her about her home city once again, but because he did not know where she lived, he invited his friends to a second ball. On the morning of the second ball, Adelaide was brushing her clothing when the prince came up the stairs. He startled her, and she turned around and dropped the brush, which fell onto the prince's feet. Angrily, Adolf picked up the brush and threw it at the embarrassed countess's head. That evening, the chief cook once again allowed her to go to the ball, and she took advantage of his permission. At the ball, Adolf told her that he had not been able to find Broomthrow. "How could you be looking for Broomthrow?" she replied. "I said brush throw." Once again they danced together, and as midnight approached she went home. She brought the chief cook 3 gold bands, claiming she had received them as a gift. The next morning the prince looked for brush throw, but could not find it. He then invited his friends and acquaintances to a third ball, which was to be even more magnificent than the first 2. At the eve of the ball, shortly before the festivities were to begin, Adelaide, late to leave the castle to get dressed for the ball, was combing her hair in front of a mirror on the staircase landing. The prince, displeased because the foreign lady had not arrived yet, walked up the stairs just as the countess dropped her comb. Prince Adolf picked it up and threw it at the kitchen servant's head. She quickly left, changed her clothes, and went to the ball. At the table, the prince said that he had not been able to find brush throw anywhere. "I can't believe that," she said. I I called the place comb throw." He didn't believe her, but she argued with him until he finally gave in. Before she left, he slipped a thin band of gold on her finger without her noticing. The next morning, the prince was not well, and he asked a chief cook to make soup for him. Adelaide heard of the request and asked for permission to make the soup. The cook agreed, but added, "If you put something in the soup that doesn't belong there, then I am the one who will be punished." She replied, "I will not put anything in it." She made the soup, and without being seen, she threw the prince's ring into the soup. The prince poured the soup into a dish and heard something jingle. He felt around and fished out the ring. Amazed, he then asked who had made the soup. "The kitchen maid," was the answer. Adolf ordered his servant, "Bring her here." She hurriedly put on the dress that she had worn the previous evening, and when the prince saw her, he recognized his dance partner. She now had to tell him her life story, and soon after he married her. In the meantime, her father had come home, and when he discovered that his daughter had already been married, he had to accept his fate. Thank goodness. The end. You know, none of the men in this story are nice. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, but uh, so she marries the guy who just threw three things at her head, which I think would have been a hint that he probably wasn't the greatest prince. But anyway, so again, I would think it'd be a deal breaker too. But uh, thank you, thank you for listening, everyone, and I hope when you find a fairy tale that isn't perfect, where the prince and the princess don't live happily ever after, that you still read it and see what you can get from it to understand another culture, another time, or it may even be uh, useful for today's life, which is certainly not all sunshine and roses. So, thank you again for listening to my dark fairy tales.
Thank you, Quinn. That was lovely. Well, if lovely is the right word to use when they're very dark. I hope you'll come back and tell us some more next year.